Alrighty, today we'll be talking about secession. Hopefully, you're finding this chapter to be nice and light, nothing too crazy at the end of the year. So, today, you all will analyze how communities change over time, and you're also going to explore what happens to an ecosystem after a disturbance. So, when we talk about ecological secession, we can pretty much sum it up as a series of changes that occur in a community over time. And these changes can be natural disasters or other major events. So, after whatever extreme disturbance there is, the number of species generally increases. So, the first example of this is going to be what's called primary succession. And this is going to begin in an area that has no remnants of the old inhabitants. So, an example of this would be a volcano explodes and it absolutely destroys all life around the volcano. So, what's going to start to happen over time is new life is going to begin to form and new species are going to begin to move in. So, this is what we call primary succession because there is nothing left of the old habitat, there's nothing left of the old area. So, it's starting essentially from scratch. The first new species to move in is what we call the pioneer species. So you can think of the pioneers way back when they explored all the different lands. Well, this is kind of how we explain primary succession is we have this pioneer species that comes in and they're the first to inhabit it. Usually it's going to be your moss and grasses, that kind of thing. It's not going to be any large animals, but rather moss and grasses, and then eventually we'll get trees and things like that. So what we're going to see happen is sometimes that the disturbance does not completely wipe out the old community, and actually some of the surviving vegetation is going to regrow, and it's going to come back quickly. This may not wipe out all the animals either, and we're going to get new species being brought in on top of that old species being reborn. And essentially this is going to happen a lot quicker than primary just because there was something left to start with. So this is going to be from things like tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, man-made destruction even. So on the top left, we have a picture of primary succession. And you can see after about 15 years, we're finally getting to see a little bit of moss. You can see a little bit of yellow on those stones. For 15 to 35 years, we get more moss. We get different types of tall grass. Then 80 years, we start to get small trees. And then after 115 years, we start to actually start getting more trees, woodland, forest type areas. And that's when we're going to start seeing a lot more animals start moving in. Secondary succession down at the bottom. You can see from 0 to 3 years, pretty much all we're left with is small grass, small plants. After 5 years, we can see a little baby tree and some of the other types of grass that are present. And then after in between 5 and 40 years, we start getting our trees back. This is definitely going to be a time where different animals are start going to move in. And then after 40 years, we see a fully developed ecosystem. So this is definitely showing that primary succession happens a lot quicker and why it happens quicker. Primary, we know now that everything's completely gone wiped out, so you're essentially starting from scratch. But in secondary, you have something to build off of, which helps speed things up significantly. So why does secession occur? Quite simply so more life can happen. Period, end of story. So trees are going to grow, creating shade and food, and more species are going to move in. I'm always intrigued by the quote from Jurassic Park in Jurassic World, I think they even had it in there, that said, life will find a way. And essentially that's what secession proves, is even in complete destruction, life will find a way to come back and thrive and be even stronger. And secession is going to provide us with that life after death, and it's the endless cycle of all ecology. So when one thing dies, something else rises in its place, and it's constantly flowing and moving. So the last thing I want to talk about is what's called a climax community. And in a climax community, we call this the most mature form of a habitat. And this is when most life has reached its peak in development, meaning that the trees are old enough where they're fully mature. Um, the animals are at a good population. There's low uh, evolution happening. Allele frequencies are pretty much staying the same. So everything is a very steady in a climax community. So after a natural disaster and secession, there's been studies that show that the new climax community that arises will look very different than the original one. And it all depends on which new species lives and which one survives. And that probably seems a little straightforward, redundant, because if we have these same species that live and survive, we just learned about how allele frequencies can change through things like the bottleneck effect. So, if there's too much human destruction, it's possible that the original climax community will never be fully restored. So, this is definitely one of those learning points in which we have to realize as a community that we do live on Earth with other species. And it's up to us, our generation, and other generations to realize that we need to protect its integrity if we want to live on this planet for a long time. So, with that being said, if you have any questions, make sure you write them down so you can ask them during class. Um, we will be going over the quiz after we do the lesson, and then we'll have an activity plan for you as well to help you all with this. Um, the keyword for today, or the secret phrase, or whatever you want to say, let's go ahead and just do Jurassic Park since that's on the top of my head. And I will see you all tomorrow or whenever in class. You all have a great day.